It is the gray, violent light of dawn in the territory of Benjamin. An unnamed Levite unbars the heavy wooden doors of an old man's house in Gibeah, preparing to step out into the dirt street and saddle his beast. He expects the city square to be empty. Instead, he finds a body blocking his path. His concubine is lying on the ground, her hands physically resting on the threshold. He looks down at her, and then he speaks a command into the silence that defies all human reason. Stop right there. This is Judges chapter 19. I will read from the King James Version. And her Lord rose up in the morning, and opened the doors of the house, and went out to go his way. And, behold, the woman his concubine was fallen down at the door of the house, and her hands were upon the threshold. Picture it. The cold morning, the splintered doorframe, the battered woman. He does not check her pulse. He does not weep. He does not fall to his knees in the dust of Gibeah. He simply stands over her bruised, broken form and issues a two-word order. Verse 28. And he said unto her, Up, and let us be going. But none answered. Sit with that. The mystery of this terrifying chapter is not merely the unchecked cruelty of a lawless city, but the cold, calculated, and deeply ritualistic slaughter that a holy man of God enacts the moment he realizes she is dead. A Levite is a man born to the priesthood. His entire ancestral calling is the stewardship of holiness. He knows the law of the altar. He knows the difference between the clean and the unclean. Yet here he stands, in the early morning shadows, staring at a woman he threw to the wolves the night before. Why are her hands gripping the threshold? The ancient Aramaic paraphrase of the Hebrew prophets, known as Targum Jonathan, sheds dark light on the cultural weight of this exact physical boundary. In the ancient Near East, the threshold was not just wood or stone, it was a line of blood. It was the boundary between the protection of a household covenant and the total chaos of the outside world. She died grasping the very line of safety he refused to cross to save her. See the scene. The Levite lifts her unresponsive body. He drapes her over his donkey. The text does not record a single tear. He walks away from the city of Gibeah without speaking another word to the old man who hosted them. He does not cry out for justice in the streets. He marches his beast back toward the hill country of Ephraim in total, terrifying quiet, a profound, suffocating silence. But the silence breaks the moment he reaches his home. When he arrives, he does not wash her body for burial. He does not dig a grave. He does not call for the weeping women to sing the lament. He reaches for a blade. Judges 19, verse 29, says, And when he was come into his house, he took a knife, and laid hold on his concubine, and divided her, together with her bones, into 12 pieces, and sent her into all the coasts of Israel. Read that again. Divided her, together with her bones. The English word knife makes this sound like a crime of passion. A desperate man grabbing whatever crude kitchen tool was lying on his table. But the biblical text does not use the common word for a household knife, or even the word for a soldier's sword. The Levite selects a very specific, deliberate instrument. The man who stood completely passive while Gibeah consumed his concubine has suddenly become meticulous in his butchery. To understand the gravity of the signal he is about to send to the 12 tribes, we must look closely at the exact Hebrew word used for the weapon in his hand. What kind of blade does a priest use to cut an unholy covenant? Inside the stone walls of his house, in the hill country of Ephraim, the Levite stands over the body of his concubine. He holds a blade. He is a man of the priesthood, a man whose ancestry is defined by the exact, unyielding laws of the tabernacle, And the word the canonical text chooses for the weapon in his hand proves that this is not a random act of domestic madness. Look closely at the Hebrew text of Judges 19:29. The English simply reads, "He took a knife." But the Hebrew word there is not shareb, the standard word for a sword or a dagger of war. It is not a common household tool for preparing a meal. The word is ma'akaleth. Read that again, ma'akaleth. It is a rare, hyper-specific word. It comes from the Hebrew root akal, which means to eat or to consume. In the ancient biblical mind, the ma'akaleth is the dedicated, holy instrument used to prepare an offering for the altar. It is the knife that divides the sacrifice before the fire of God consumes it. Picture it, the Levite is not acting as a panicked murderer trying to dispose of evidence. He is acting as a dark, twisted priest. He has transformed his own house into a slaughterhouse, and he is treating the battered woman on his floor as a ritual sacrifice. But to understand the true, haunting weight of what he is doing, we have to track this exact word back to its most famous use in the Bible. Turn back to the book of Genesis. Chapter 22, Mount Moriah. A father and a son are walking up the rocky ridge. The father is carrying the fire and the wood. The son asks where the lamb is, and Genesis 22:6 tells us exactly what else the father carries. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand, and a knife, and they went both of them together. The knife, the Ma'akaleth. 4 verses later, the climax of the test, Genesis 22:10. And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. Stop right there. Same word, same heavy blade. Abraham held the Ma'akaleth over Isaac in absolute, faithful obedience to the living God. Now, generations later, a corrupted Levite holds the exact same instrument over his dead concubine in a state of absolute spiritual decay. I hold this as one reading, a careful tracing of the original language, not the final word. But Hebrew authors do not waste vocabulary. The deliberate repetition of Ma'akaleth forces us to compare the two scenes. On Mount Moriah, Abraham was stopped by the angel of the Lord. The sacrifice was prevented. But in the hill country of Ephraim, there is no angel. There is no voice from heaven commanding the Levite to lay down the blade. See the scene. The blade falls. He divides her, bone and flesh, into 12 pieces. He is preparing a covenant, a dark, horrific oath cut in blood, intended to bind the 12 tribes of Israel together. He dispatches messengers to carry the gruesome pieces out into all the coasts of Israel. But what exactly was happening in the streets of that city the night before to drive a holy man to such a grotesque extreme? To understand the blood on his hands now, we have to look closely at the men who were beating on the door then. One blade connects a holy mountain to a butchered woman. The 12 tribes are about to receive the darkest mail ever sent in the history of Israel. But what ancient, supernatural rot had infected the city of Gibeah to set this apocalyptic chain of events in motion? The sun has already set over the limestone ridges of Benjamin. Inside the old man's house in Gibeah, the Levite is eating and drinking, his beast tied in the courtyard. But outside, the dirt street is not empty. Shadows are shifting, footsteps are gathering in the dark. Judges 19, 22 inches. The King James says this, "Now, as they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of Belial, beset the house round about, and beat at the door, and spake to the master of the house, the old man, saying, Bring forth the man that came into thine house, that we may know him." Stop right there. Bring forth the man, that we may know him. If you know your Bible, that exact phrase should freeze your blood. Because this is not the first time a mob of men, has surrounded a house at night, beating on a door, demanding that a host surrender his male guest to the unnatural lust of the street. It happened centuries earlier. Turn back to Genesis 19:5. The angels of the Lord are inside the house of Lot. The men of the city surround the perimeter, and they scream the exact same terrifying command. Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. Same demand, same threshold, same unnatural hunger. Gibeah is not just a city struggling with high crime. Gibeah is actively, deliberately resurrecting the ghost of Sodom. They are an Israelite tribe living inside the promised land, yet they are perfectly mimicking the behavior of the most cursed city in human history. But the canonical text gives us a terrifying clue as to why this rot has taken hold. It calls them certain sons of Belial. In modern English, we tend to read Belial as a generic, poetic synonym for worthlessness or wickedness. But ancient Jewish readers did not read it as a mere adjective. They read it as a name. If you read the Dead Sea Scrolls, sealed in jars in the caves of Qumran 2,000 years ago, Belial is not an abstract concept. In these texts, specifically the war scroll, Belial is a proper noun. He is the commander of darkness. He is the chief of the fallen spirits, the architect of hostility, deeply connected to the ancient corruption of the Watchers who descended on Mount Hermon before the flood to corrupt human flesh. I hold this as their telling, not as proven fact. But when the author of Judges calls the men of Gibeah the sons of Belial, he is signaling a supernatural origin to their depravity. This is not simply bad hospitality. This is pre-flood darkness erupting in the heart of the tribe of Benjamin. Picture it. The men are pounding on the wood. The threshold is shuddering. The Levite is a priest of the living God. He knows the history of Sodom. He knows that when the men of Sodom beat on Lot's door, the angels struck them with blindness, and God rained fire and brimstone from the sky to purge the earth of their sickness. But tonight, in Gibeah, there are no angels. There is no fire from heaven. There is only a terrified priest who decides that the only way to survive the sons of Belial is to thrust his concubine out into the dark. The sons of Belial demanded the Levite, but they took the woman, consuming her until the breaking of the day. But to understand why the Levite was forced to rely on a lone, helpless old man for shelter, in the first place, we must rewind to the moment he first arrived in the city square. What exactly was waiting for him in the suffocating silence of Gibeah before the sun ever went down? The sun is dropping fast behind the hill country of Benjamin. The Levite leads his saddled donkeys, his concubine, and his servant off the main road and through the stone gates of Gibeah. He walks into the city plaza, expecting the ancient, ironclad law of Near Eastern hospitality to greet him. Instead, he hits a wall of dead silence. Judges 19:15 inches, the King James reads. And they turned aside thither, to go in and to lodge in Gibeah. And when he went in, he sat him down in a street of the city, for there was no man that took them into his house to lodging. Stop right there. The English word street feels narrow, like an empty alleyway where one might easily be overlooked. But the Hebrew word here is arkob, the broad, open plaza directly inside the city gates. It is the central nervous system of an ancient town, the marketplace, the seat of the elders. To sit in the arkob as the sun goes down is to be highly visible to every citizen returning from the fields. In the ancient world, leaving a traveler in the plaza overnight is not a cultural oversight. It is a calculated, hostile act. The Levite has his own bread, he has his own wine, he has provender for his beasts. He requires nothing from his hosts, but a roof to cover his head. Picture it. He sits on his baggage. The shadows lengthen. The men of Gibeah walk past him. They look at him. They look at the woman. And they keep walking. To grasp the paralyzing weight of this standoff, we look to Flavius Josephus, the first-century Roman Jewish historian. In Book 5 of his Antiquities of the Jews, Josephus paints a scene that the stripped-down biblical text only implies. Josephus records that the Levites stood in the public square while the citizens of Gibeah intentionally barred their doors against him. They were observing him not as a fellow Israelite, but as prey. The silence in the square was not the quiet of a sleepy agricultural town. It was a predator's gaze. I hold this as their telling, not as proven fact. But it aligns flawlessly with the horror about to erupt. The men of Benjamin are actively starving him of sanctuary. Then, the tense silence of the plaza breaks. Judges 19:16 says, "And, behold, there came an old man from his work out of the field at even, which was also of Mount Ephraim. And he sojourned in Gibeah, but the men of the place were Benjamites." Read that again. The text points a flashing, desperate arrow at tribal identity. The only man in the entire city willing to cross the Rakob and break the hostile stare of Gibeah is not a Benjamite. He is an outsider, an alien living among them, originally from the Levites' own hill country of Ephraim. See the scene. The old man hurries over. He does not offer a relaxed, polite greeting. He looks at the Levite in the darkening square and tells him to pull everything off the street immediately. "Peace be with thee," he says in verse 20. "Only lodge not in the street." The old man pulls them across his threshold, barring the heavy doors against the watchful eyes of the plaza. He believes he has saved them from the wolves of Gibeah. But stepping out of the open square did not cancel the threat of the city. It only gave the sons of Belial a fixed, inescapable target. The Levite survived the silence of the Rakob, only to turn a holy blade against his own household the following dawn. The old man offered a covenant of protection, but the Levite answers the terror of that night by twisting a sacred oath into a bloody summons for war. What ancient, binding ritual was he actively mocking when he divided her bones into 12 pieces? The morning sun hits the limestone paths of Ephraim as 12 messengers run out from the courtyard of the Levite. They scatter in 12 different directions, heading north toward Dan and south toward the deserts of Judah. They are not carrying scrolls. They are not shouting a verbal warning. They are carrying 12 bloody packages. The divided pieces of the Levite's concubine, dropping them at the feet of the tribal leaders of Israel. In our modern mind, dismemberment is the ultimate act of chaotic madness. But in the ancient Near East, it was grammar. It was a sentence spoken in blood. Picture it. The messengers lay the flesh on the ground in the center of the tribal camps. The elders stare at it in horror. The Levite is not just sending evidence of a crime, he is invoking a terrifying legal ritual. In biblical Hebrew, you do not make a covenant. The phrase is karath berith, to cut a covenant. When ancient kings forged an ironclad treaty, they did not sign parchment. They took an animal, divided it in half, and laid the bloody pieces on the earth. The two parties would then walk down the aisle of flesh, swearing a self-maledictory oath, "May the gods do to me what has been done to this animal, if I fail to keep my word." We see a shadow of this in Genesis 15, and a direct parallel in 1 Samuel 11, when King Saul cuts his oxen into pieces and sends them through the coasts of Israel to summon the army. Same ritual, same message. But the Levite does not use an ox, he uses the ma'akaleth. He takes the holy instrument of sacrifice and applies it to the woman he abandoned to the sons of Belial. He weaponizes his own tragedy, twisting a sacred oath into a mafia-style threat. March with me against Gibeah, or let your own flesh be divided next. Watch what the text does when the packages arrive. Judges 19. 30 inches, the King James records the shockwave. And it was so. that all that saw it said, "There was no such deed done nor seen from the day that the children of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt unto this day. Consider of it, take advice, and speak your minds." Read that again. There was no such deed done nor seen. Even in the lawless, brutal era of the judges, this crossed a line into the unspeakable. The Levite's dark, twisted anti-covenant works perfectly. He corners the conscience of a disorganized nation. 400,000 footmen of Israel draw their swords, form a massive, unified assembly at Mizpeh, and march directly toward the gates of Gibeah. They do not come to slaughter the innocent. They come with a singular, righteous demand. Hand over the sons of Belial, the men who resurrected the ghost of Sodom, so that Israel can purge the evil from its borders. This is one reading, not the final word. But the ancient tribal dynamics tell us that blood demands blood, and the 12 tribes fully expected the elders of Benjamin to drag the guilty men out of the city by their hair. Benjamin is Israelite. Benjamin knows the law of Moses. Benjamin knows exactly what happens to a city that harbors the darkness of the watchers. The stage is set for a swift, surgical execution. But when the massive army of Israel arrives at the threshold of Gibeah and makes their demand, the tribe of Benjamin does the unthinkable. 400,000 swords are waiting outside the walls for justice. But instead of handing over the monsters, the tribe of Benjamin locks their gates and prepares to burn the nation to the ground. What tribal psychology could possibly drive an entire lineage to sacrifice their own survival to protect the sons of Belial? 400,000 swords catch the midday sun in the valley below Gibeah. The united army of Israel stands in formation. They are not here to conquer. They are here to amputate. They send messengers up to the heavy stone gates of the city with a single, legally binding demand under the law of Moses. Judges 20, 13 inches, the King James reads, "Now therefore deliver us the men, the children of Belial, which are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death, and put away evil from Israel." But the children of Benjamin would not hearken to the voice of their brethren, the children of Israel. Stop right there. They would not hearken. The Hebrew word is shama, to hear, to listen, to yield. Benjamin hears the demand perfectly, but they actively reject the authority of the covenant behind it. They choose the monsters. Read that again. The math of this refusal is completely suicidal. The tribe of Benjamin is fielding 26,000 swordsmen. The united tribes are standing at their doorstep with 400,000. It is a 15-to-1 slaughter waiting to happen. Yet an entire Israelite tribe decides to shield the men who resurrected the ghost of Sodom. Why? What dark psychology drives a holy tribe to defend the sons of Belial? The Book of Jasher, an ancient historical record named in the canonical books of Joshua and 2 Samuel, offers a chilling window into the toxic independence of this era. Jasher records that tribal pride had so deeply infected the 12 sons of Jacob that blood loyalty completely eclipsed divine law. A tribe would rather face annihilation than submit to the public humiliation of outside discipline. The Watcher, corruption in Gibeah, had found a perfect shield in the pride of Benjamin. I hold this as their telling, not as proven fact, but it bridges the psychological gap flawlessly. The elders of Benjamin do not look at the sons of Belial and see unnatural evil. They see their own flesh, and they will burn the nation down to protect it. Picture it. The gates of Gibeah finally open, but they do not open to surrender the guilty. They open to march out an army. Judges 20:15 and 16 details the terrifying force Benjamin brings to the threshold. 26,000 men, and then a highly specific guard. Among all this people, there were 700 chosen men left-handed. Every one could sling stones at an hair breadth. and not miss. Sit with that. These are not mere peasants throwing rocks. In the ancient world, left-handed slingers were elite, specialized assassins. The Hebrew phrasing for left-handed literally translates to restricted in the right hand, suggesting a forced, rigorous martial training that made them deadly, unpredictable opponents in close formation. Benjamin is not cowering behind the limestone walls. They are deploying their deadliest weapons. They believe they can win. The bloody 12-piece anti-covenant the Levite cut with his holy blade has successfully summoned the nation. But it has completely failed to bring repentance. It has only forced the deep, supernatural rot of the promised land out into the open sun. See the scene. The men of Gibeah consumed a woman in the dark. Now, the tribe of Benjamin prepares to consume the armies of Israel in the daylight. Same violence, same spirit. The children of Abraham have actively aligned themselves with the commander of darkness. The battle lines are drawn in the dust of Gibeah. The first wave of righteous Israelite soldiers marches up the hill toward the 700 slingers. But the carnage that follows over the next 2 days defies every expectation of divine justice. The holy tribes marched to purge the darkness, only to be butchered by it. How does a massive army, on a mission ordained by God, lose 40,000 men to a single city, protecting the ghost of Sodom? The sun sets over the valley of Gibeah on the second day of battle. The ground is soaked with the blood of 40,000 Israelite soldiers. The massive, righteous army of the United Tribes has just been shattered twice by the left-handed slingers of Benjamin. They came to enact swift justice on the sons of Belial, and instead they have been butchered by their own brethren. They do not retreat to their tents. They retreat upward, dragging their wounded into the high country, to a place called Bethel. Judges 20, 26 inches. The King James reads, "Then all the children of Israel and all the people went up and came unto the house of God, and wept, and sat there before the Lord, and fasted that day until even, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord." Stop right there. Watch what the text does here to completely destroy our assumed timeline. For chapters, the book of Judges has felt like a slow, agonizing downward spiral occurring centuries after Joshua. But verses 27 and 28 drop a chronological anchor that changes everything. The text continues, "And the children of Israel inquired of the Lord, for the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days, and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before it in those days, saying, Shall I yet again go out to battle against the children of Benjamin my brother, or shall I cease?" Read that again. Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron, the high priest, the man who walked the sands of the wilderness with Moses, is standing alive before the physical ark of the covenant in Bethel. Sit with that. This horrific civil war, this violent defense of Watcher-level corruption in Gibeah, is not happening at the end of Israel's history. It is happening at the very beginning. The generation that marched around Jericho is now watching their children annihilate one another over the twisted, bloody anti-covenant of a corrupted Levite. See the scene. Phinehas stands before the ark. The Lord answers, "Go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into thine hand." On the third day, the trap snaps shut. Israel uses the exact same military tactic Joshua used at the city of Ai. They draw the left-handed slingers out of Gibeah with a feigned retreat, while 10,000 men wait hidden in the shadows of the tree line. When the men of Benjamin are miles from the gates, the ambushers rush the empty city and set it ablaze. The men of Benjamin look back. A massive pillar of smoke is rising into the sky. It is the exact same visual of destruction that consumed Sodom in Genesis 19. Same darkness, same fire, the slaughter is absolute. 25,100 men of Benjamin fall in a single afternoon. But the army of Israel does not stop at the battlefield. They turn their blades on the entire tribal territory. They burn the towns. They kill the beasts. They wipe out the women and the children. This is one reading, not the final word, but the ancient records suggest this was not merely a military victory, it was an unholy amputation. The 12 pieces of the concubine demanded a cost, and that cost was the total erasure of the 12th tribe. Only 600 Benjamite men escape into the wilderness, hiding like ghosts in the limestone caves of the Rock of Rimmon. The tribe of Benjamin is effectively dead. The blade of the Machileth has successfully cut the nation to pieces. The smoke over Gibeah eventually clears, leaving a shattered nation staring at the ashes of their own brothers. But the true horror of this civil war is not found in the thousands of bodies scattered across the valley, but in the terrifying spiritual vacuum that allowed it all to happen. What is the final, haunting conclusion the author forces us to realize about this entire bloody tragedy? Go back now to the gray, violent light of dawn where this film began. The unnamed Levite unbarring the heavy wooden doors in the territory of Benjamin, the cold morning air, the splintered doorframe, the concubine lying in the dirt, her hands physically resting on the threshold. You have read that scene 100 times as a tragic, senseless crime. But today, you know exactly what was standing on the other side of that door. You know that the men in the street were not merely violent locals. They were the sons of Belial, resurrecting the ghost of Sodom and the dark hunger of the Watchers. You know that when the Levite returned to his home in Ephraim, he did not reach for a common tool. He reached for the Machileth, the holy, sacrificial blade of Mount Moriah. You have watched an ancient, sacred covenant twisted into a bloody, 12-piece summons. And you have seen that unholy oath nearly wipe out the tribe of Benjamin from the face of the earth. But look at the man standing over her broken body again. When he looks down at her hands, gripping the threshold, and speaks those two impossible words, "Up, and let us be going," he is not just a cold husband fleeing a bad night. He is a corrupted priest standing at the edge of a dying nation. The author of Judges does not leave us guessing about the root cause of this absolute nightmare. The canonical text brackets this entire bloody narrative with one recurring, haunting verse. It opens the chapter, and it serves as the final gravestone for the entire book. Judges 21, 25 inches. The King James reads, "In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes." Sit with that. That is the true, horrifying monument of Gibeah. When there is no king, when there is no divine authority anchoring the soul of a nation, the holy becomes the profane. The threshold of protection becomes a line of betrayal. The sacred Machileth, meant to divide the sacrifice before the fire of God, becomes a butcher's knife, used to hack a woman into pieces of political mail. The tribes of Israel do not fight the darkness. They protect it. They burn their own brothers to ash in the name of righteous vengeance. We have unlocked the ritual of the knife. We have traced the terrifying psychology of the sons of Belial. But the dirt of Gibeah is still holding the rest, because if a Levite in the hill country of Ephraim could warp the ancient ways of Abraham this deeply, what other sacred rituals were being twisted in the dark corners of the Promised Land? While the throne sat empty, I hold this as one reading, a careful mapping of the text and the ancient mind, not the final word. If you made it to the end of this journey, do not leave silently. Comment the word "watched" below so I know who is sitting with the text. And subscribe, because we are just beginning to unearth the ancient records. Then, copy the link to this video and send it to one person who loves the deep mysteries of the Old Testament but has never heard. The dark truth of the Levite's blade. A nation without a king will always turn its holy things into weapons.